again, because we're trying to finish this text, and mashallah, we have so many gaps between each session, I do always like to kind of try to summarize, and I'm not going to go into every point here, but the text that we've been reading, which kind of is the basis for the discussions we're having here, is called Agenda to Change Our Condition. Well, I shouldn't say the text, actually, forgive me, it's in the text, it's in this text, but it's also, you can find the PDF of it. It's in the back of Agenda to Change Our Condition. So there's something, it's Appendix A, and it's a text that's called Foundations of the Spiritual Path. And this text is in addition to the book here, but you can, as I said, find the PDF. And it's from Sidi Ahmad Zarruq, who was a very well-known Moroccan scholar in the 15th century or the 9th century, depending on what calendar you're looking at. But he wrote this as a roadmap, for us to try to find our way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to know what to do, what not to do, how to avoid the pitfalls spiritually and also externally, because we have that will, put us on the wrong path, but we also have external threats, which are people who we may not know are not necessarily good influence over us. So he kind of, in this text, it's not very long, but it's deep in that the way he's organized it. So I think, from my recollection, we may have gotten very close to the end, the last session we had. So I'm just going to kind of talk about today how to know, who is really someone who we can trust with our affairs, spiritually speaking, because there's a lot of charlatans in this day and age. There are a lot of people, if I turn on, the internet, I'm really trying not to be as online as I used to be before. I was very active, as some of you know, Facebook and Instagram, but every time I'm there, I'm realizing what a cesspool the internet is. Of course, there's good, mashallah, there. I'm not going to take away those people who are trying to do good, and I pray that I'm counted among them, that I'm there to do good. But I think, generally speaking, there's a lot of negativity online. There's a lot of harm online, and there are a lot of people, and Allah knows their reality, but I don't believe they're representing this beautiful deen the way that it was intended to be, and they're causing a lot of misguidance. And if we're not mindful of how to identify those types of people, then we may find ourselves being drawn by whatever effect they have. Some of them are very well spoken, some of them are charming, some of them are very attractive, and we have to really guard our hearts, right? Because it's easy to get, and the Prophet ﷺ warned us that toward the end of time there will be people who have eloquent speech, who are just, they're orators, they speak well, but they don't have much knowledge, and they certainly misguide people. And so we have to, again, look to scholars like Sidi Ahmad Zarruq, who helps us to identify them. So he says here, anyone who claims to have a station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet reveals any of the following 5, is either a liar or is deluded. So it's always good, the way he's framed it, obviously, he's giving us something to look at, right, in someone else, like to look for, in someone else. But I always like to also apply it to myself, because this is, a warning. If you have certain traits and qualities that are negative, this makes you, not trustworthy. So I always advise myself to start with myself. Any description that's negative, like, a hypocrite is this, a liar is this, someone who's misguided is this, always start with yourself, because otherwise, you're kind of acclimating the nafs to think you're above that. And that's one of the very traps of the nafs. The nafs will make you think like, they're just talking about someone else. What if they're talking about someone that bears a very close resemblance to you? You better work that out, and say, alhamdulillah, I don't do that. Alhamdulillah, I don't do that. Okay, I'm okay right now, right? So, with that said, he says, first, using one's limbs in sinful acts, right? The limbs are, given to us as gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The faculties, right, our senses, are given to us as sources of knowledge, right? Our sight, our hearing, our speech. These are all ways for us to know our Creator. And then our limbs are given to us in order to act, right? in order to do good deeds. And so if you're taking the blessing of your hands, for example, and you're sinning, then that means you are not grateful for the blessing of your hand, right? If you're using your eyes for haram, that means you are not grateful for the gift of sight. And what is using your eyes in haram? We're in an age where we're bombarded literally with every type of image out there. And so we really have to, again, guard our heart. Remember, the scholars, there was kind of a debate about it, but some were of the opinion that the eyes are the quickest inroad to the heart. Others were of the opinion that it was the ears, right? But the quickest way to destroy the spiritual heart is through the eyes and the ears. So we cannot underestimate the effect of allowing a bombardment of images, right? Like, images can be very harmful. Why? Because you can't, and I'm not only talking about like explicit or profane images. I'm also talking about images that, maybe they're suggestive. Maybe they evoke an emotion in you that you can't erase, in your mind. So if you're looking at something that, like right now, doom scrolling, right? Doom scrolling is looking for images of what's going on. If something comes up on your news feed, it's one thing. But there are people who, are so, like, they can't look away, right? They can't look away from what's happening in the world, and so they're actually actively seeking images. They're scouring the internet looking for videos. And there are those people, believe it or not, because if your life, I hate to say it, but it's just something that happens. If you're not happy in your life, for some people, it can make you feel better if you watch the misery of other people. So looking at misery, for some people, becomes a coping mechanism to deal with their own ingratitude or whatever. Whatever problems, tribulations, that they're having. So they will go out looking for that type of image. Similar to, I know people who literally, you're not happy in your marriage, so you want to, look for people who are also not happy in their marriage, and then those relationships can be formed, right? And now they say misery loves company. So let's get together and bash our husbands together and talk about this problem or that problem. Or, I don't like my mother-in-law. Oh, you don't like your mother-in-law? Let's hate on her. So it's like we seek out people that we find some sort of a, connection with, and it can happen even passive or through the online medium, where you're looking for people who have something that they're dealing with that's worse than you. Now, if you're doing that again, and seeking some sort of not enjoyment, but it's almost like lightening your burden, and you're not realizing it's affecting you because you become desensitized, right? And that's why actively seeking this is not good. Actively seeking these things is not good for the heart. You will become desensitized, and I think that's pretty much why so many people are nowadays they don't seem to respond anymore. It was like, imagine, you would think that those initial images of entire refugee camps being blown to smithereens and bodies being burned and limbs being torn apart would be enough, right, for the world to just be like, that we cannot do this. Never again. We said never again. How could this happen, right? But here we are, almost, a year and a half or more later, and it's only gotten worse. And you're just like, how did that happen? Well, if you don't have the right lens with which you're looking through to process and understand what's happening, then the heart can easily become completely numb and desensitized. And then now it's like, you don't even really care. And that's the stuff for what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of people who just, they've gotten what they call, there's a term that's coined for it, like fatigue, It's like, I'm kind of tired of it. Astaghfirullah. Like, you could actually, and that's a real tragedy, but I think part of it is that you're looking for it. So when we say using one's limbs in sinful acts, it could be all of this, looking for things that are profane, that are indecent, looking at that stuff, or hearing that stuff, lyrics, music, the effect of music, the effect of anything that's foul. It actually affects the heart. So if you're doing these things actively, this is a problem. And if you make justifications for it, you have to rectify yourself. There's no justification to listen to songs that you like just because they're catchy tunes, but they're dropping F-bombs every second. Or, they have lewd music videos and you're like dancing to that. There's no justification for it. We have very fine lines of what's appropriate and what's not. So a lot of our community, we have to be honest with ourselves. I think I've seen plenty of things online with youth culture. You see muhajjabat, you see people who look like they're Muslim, who are cursing every other word. So we've really strayed from our path, and that's why he mentions it first. Either you're deluded or you're a liar, because you cannot be making a claim about anything if you have these qualities. Feigning piety, so this whole performativity, right, of piety, we have to be very careful. Making an outward display of your faith practice, and of course, always look to yourself first. As I said, we don't ever want to presume anybody's intentions looking at them, but if there's no costume, of like a pious Muslim, but unfortunately, we do have a culture where there are some groups that may have this idea, that in order to really, it's a group think, right? Like, if I want to look like I'm this practicing person, I have to, look a certain way. I have to, whether it's in their attire or they have maybe accessories, we want to be careful, if this becomes part of your everyday outfit, right, and it's on full display, right? Why are you doing it? Or is it a bracelet? But what does it mean, right? What does it mean if it's a bracelet that you're wearing everywhere? Are you actually, because if you're doing it, it's different. But a lot of people, it becomes kind of like, well, I'm showing something. So these are little subtle tricks of Iblis, and anyway, again, we have to work this out for our own selves, but when we say feigning piety, it's also the manner with which you are. Like, if there are some people, they don't, they may act a certain way with some people than they do with others. So if you become super religious when you're in a space of like religious people, and then you're not that person at home or with your family, what is that? Why do you suddenly, what is that, like, performance, right? So, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't expect that from any of us, the sudden, like, it's like this effect that you have, like you turn it on and then you turn it off, and that's just, there's no sincerity there. So just guarding your heart from ever acting the part. Just be real, be a real, genuine person. If everybody, and of course, sometimes you're compelled to follow the group in doing something, but if it's not like your normal practice, you may want to just ask yourself, why am I participating in this? Is it because I'm afraid of them thinking something of me or not, or thinking I'm this way or that way? Then your focus is off, and that's what riya is. Riya is being too worried about what other people think of you. So that's why it's so important to study the disease of the heart, because that's definitely one of the signs of it, is that you're playing a part, but it's not your true self. So that's the second thing he mentions, desiring the ephemeral world. So if you're too consumed by this dunya, then you're likely delusional. Because if we haven't learned yet, just from everything we're watching, how in the blink of an eye everything can turn, and you're living for this dunya, that means you don't get it. There's a disconnect, right? Because as we've already talked about, this is not the abode for the believers. It's just we're in passing, we're in transit, right? The believer's here like a traveler, and we don't settle here. So if you're settling, that means you're building, and you're building permanent residence. If you're traveling, how does a traveler move, right? You go from one city to the next city to the next city. You're kind of in motion. So you realize, like, what that means in a practical sense is you go with the decree of Allah. You surrender to His decree for you, right? So, I know people they get in a relationship. And I'm just giving an example. So you get married or you have a relationship, and that doesn't work out. Okay? It didn't work out. So does that mean that, you fall apart and you just, you start to lose hope, and you you fall into despair? Or do you realize, like, you know what, everybody has their tests, this is part of the dunya. I didn't intend for that relationship not to work out, it just didn't work out. So if it's Allah's decree that I'm now out of that relationship, that's His decree. My intentions were good, it's just part of life, I'm moving on. But some people, they can't deal with losing the vision or the dream, right? The life that they built for themselves. Whatever that idea was. They had an idea, they had some hope. And so when that doesn't work out, then it's like they fall apart. It's dunya. And I mean, again, looking at the Quranic stories, the prophets, the awliya, time and time again, you see these people who are the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they go through so many of these tribulations. So does that mean anything in terms of their station with God, or does it just mean that they're in a place designed to put everybody who's in it through these different trials, and that was their trial, and you might have your trial. But the point is not to fall apart when things don't work out. And if you're dunya-oriented, that's what happens to you. So dunya-oriented people can't look beyond this world. You know, they can't deal with loss. They can't deal with grief very well. And, you know, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for strength from that, because, you know, if we don't have, you know, support, and we don't have, you know, these tools that we're supposed to learn through, you know, our life, how to deal with it, then we may fall into these things. But that's why it's so important to have, you know, again, guidance and good suhbah, because when you're sinking, you know, those are the people that pull you out. Like, snap out of it, it'll be fine, you'll be fine, you know. Believe in Allah. Allah tests those He loves the most. It's your test, but you'll be fine. Don't fall apart. This isn't the world for us. There's another world, you know. And so these kind of reminders will wake you back up. But those who are, again, full of just, I mean, they just look for dunya, they can't see those things. They don't want to hear those messages. So we ask Allah again to protect us from that. But, you know, the signs again. So using limbs in sinful acts, pretending to be pious, feigning that piety, desiring the ephemeral world, not really thinking about the akhirah, wanting all the things in dunya, and then speaking ill of Allah's servants. So, you know, nowadays, for example, you go on YouTube, there's entire platforms that are videos that were Muslims who are purporting to be scholars. They have like sheikh in their title, or imam, or whatever title they have. They just make reaction videos condemning other scholars and other Muslims. Like, astaghfirullah, what's happening, right? Like, how is that part of anything that you find in our deen? Where do you see any example of any righteous person doing things like that? The scholars differed, but they would never, true scholars would never make it their identity to be known to be a hater of other people. Like, that's just crazy, right? But nowadays, that's what we have. We have entire personas, or entire, like I said, platforms with millions and millions of views, where they're debating other Muslims or non-Muslims, and then, you know, it's like, I mean, that's their whole shtick. Their whole shtick is, let me bring someone on who's either from another faith or another, you know, maybe perspective, and I'm just gonna try to berate them, and it becomes this ridiculous, you know, display of arrogance and nothing to do with our deen. But, you know, and then it's ghiba, because afterwards, you know, it's like when they're talking to their audience, it's just, you know, munafiq, he's this, she's this. There are brothers who do it to sisters. It's just all over the place. So we've really, I mean, this is why it's so important to understand it. If you're seeing anybody who's acting like there's someone who's a teacher or in a position of authority, and they start to condemn another Muslim publicly, and, you know, or champion those who are, because you'll see it sometimes in comments, you know, the comment section, people will also come out, you know, liking people's hateful comments, you know, clapping. So it's like emojis, you know. How petty are we? How high school? Thumbs up, you know, clapping because someone, you know, said something that was spiteful or just, you know, vindictive about another person. But this is what we're seeing now, right? And then lacking the respect that Allah commands towards all Muslims. So that's another extension of that. So nobody who's in a position of any type of spiritual authority would do those things, because they have what? Taqwa. And taqwa immediately arrests all of that. If you have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're guardful of your tongue, you know, because you've read the stories, you've read the hadith, you've read the ayahs in the Quran that warn against the one, that one word, the tongue takes the most people to hellfire, but one word or deed could literally make all the difference between Jannah and Jahannam. So a person who has taqwa is so cautious, right? And when we fall and we make mistakes, it's like, astaghfirullah, ya Allah, please don't hold me to account. And I mean, you see people who really go into a panic, right? Because when they catch themselves, giving sadaqah, getting up, making wudu, praying, doing dhikr, doing astaghfir. That's the way the believer responds to their own shortcomings, to their own failings. But a person who does not have taqwa, this is just their identity. They base their whole identity on this. So may Allah protect us against from falling into these things or falling under the spell of these types of people, because they can be very persuasive. They can speak sometimes, like I said, very eloquently as well. So you have on the one side they may be engaging in this type of behavior, but on the other side they could be speaking eloquently, so you fall into it. But he mentions that as a warning for us, so that we do not take those type of people as spiritual guides and leaders. And then he goes on to say that such people rarely die in a state of grace, right? The qualifications of the spiritual guide with whom the seeker may safely entrust. So now he's flipping it. Those are the people you want to stay away from. If they do anything from those 5, stay away. It's immediate red flag. They're not worthy of your time. Turn it off. Turn away. But who should you seek? Unadulterated spiritual, the qualifications of the spiritual guide with whom the seeker may safely entrust his soul are 5. Unadulterated spiritual experience. So this is actually, it's an interesting choice of words, but I think, what this describes is when you're in the company of such people, it's just this effect that you feel, right? And it's not unadulterated, it's pure. It's a pure spiritual experience. Like you feel uplifted by them, you feel connected, when you're listening to them, or if they're, just in their presence. And they, our teachers used to say that true people of Allah, just looking at their face is it's a blessing. So you feel the effect of that internally, right? You'll feel like a turning of the heart just by looking at them. They don't have to say anything, right? And there are those people who, mashallah, have nur in their face and have light in their face, and it can really affect your heart. So that, can be something like that. Or if you're praying behind someone, you're doing dhikr with someone, you're just in space with them, but you feel just this deep connection, to Allah through their company, right? That's someone that, inshallah, you can entrust your soul with. Sound outward knowledge, that when they speak, they are not just speaking from their own, hearts, but they're presenting either, and that's why, our teachers always used to say, follow teachers who cite their sources, who share, if they're reading, if they're teaching, that they're teaching from traditional sources, from sound actual sources, who are not just speaking from their own, ideas. Because it's, everybody has opinions, and there's a lot of, like I said, people who are happy to give unsolicited advice and just speak from their own minds, but we have to be cautious because there's just so much misinformation, and that's why to look at the, like our tradition, you have to appreciate the lengths that our scholars went to preserve the religion and keep it free from all of these, ideas that would otherwise misguide. They really went to great lengths in preserving, just for example, the hadith alone. If you study hadith sciences and you realize the lengths that the scholars went through to make certain that the hadith was sahih, or, they would grade it based on who said it, who were the other, in the narration, who was it narrated from. They vetted every single person in the isnad. They would travel sometimes. Imagine back, centuries ago, traveling from, Basra, Iraq to Syria, just to get one hadith. But they took such, seriously. These are the words of the Prophet ﷺ. And they did a lot to make sure that what we have is pure, it's sound. So what's preferable? Think of it like in the grand scheme of things. Is it preferable to entrust knowledge, or to trust sources that have gone through that filtration process centuries ago by scholars who obviously had all of those prerequisite qualities, the taqwa, the knowledge, access to all of the other true scholars? Is it better to go there, or with people who, just speak from their minds today? And there's plenty of people who don't have. Just go to TikTok alone. You see all these young. May Allah guide them. They're zealot. They're very zealous in their what they claim to be their love for Islam. But a lot of times, astaghfirullah, they're not speaking from sound tradition. They're literally speaking. And then you see all these young Muslims who are being swayed by that. Young boys who are falling for that, young girls who are. So we're living in really a time of immense fitna. But a sound outward knowledge is vetted knowledge. It's substantiated, credentials. Like, who did you learn from? Where did you learn from? All of that is very clear. If people don't tell you their teachers, or you don't know someone's teachers, be careful. Be careful no matter how good they sound, no matter how many views they have on their content, or even if they're writing. There was a book that was, published. I don't want to single it out because it's a problem. But there was a book that came out a while ago, and a lot of people jumped on this book because it evoked a lot of emotion, But when people who were more scholarly started looking at some of the sources mentioned, it was really problematic. Because, the stories and the kind of ideas that were shared, especially when we talk about aqidah, if people are using, maybe ideas that are more common to other traditions, to try to draw parallels or just, I'm trying not to, I don't want to single this book out, but I think some of the ideas in that book were borrowed from other traditions, and they were kind of mixed with Islamic ideas. And if you don't have discernment, or you don't know, you could fall easily for it, because it was written with a lot of emotional language, right? And so imagine people who are going through a lot of hardships in their life, they're suffering, and then they read a book that kind of speaks to their pain, and it's using all of this flowery language, and then it borrows from other traditions, ideas that are not from our tradition. And there's a lot of spiritual ideas. There's a lot of ideas that sound really flowery and they kind of, again, evoke a certain emotion in us. But we have to know, is it sound? Is it from our tradition? If it's not, then there's no space for that. And that's how misguidance happens, And I'll give you just a brief example. This idea of, what is it called now? They used to have The Secret, and then there was this other thing. Oh, manifesting, right? Manifesting became this big thing. I've seen many Muslim pages talking about manifesting. You just have to think it, and then it'll come. There's no religious, there's no mention of Allah. There's no mention of make dua. It's just if you do a vision board, if you see it, and then where did they get that idea from? These are very secular ideas. These are ideas that are not rooted in our religious traditions. They're rooted in a worldview that is cut off from the divine, because the way they speak about everything is that the universe will give it to you. What's the universe? What does that mean, right? If you want something and you channel this energy, it's like a form of magic, right? That magical thinking, that'll just come to you. But these are the kinds of ideas that are coming and creeping in to the religious, spaces that some Muslims have, and we have to be careful because they can speak to you. I've been literally contacted by people, who are in a panic because of black magic. There's pages of again, people who claim to be Muslim and that they have some training of how to remove black magic. Black magic is not something that you can just train yourself in. You have to have it's like a proper area of study, and most of the people who do it, you're not going to find them charging you money. But there are people, there are pages on social media where they charge thousands of dollars. I'll remove any black magic from you. It's astaghfirullah, this is exactly, and that's usually what they're doing. And so if you are in a desperate state, my husband's leaving me, please, I think he has some sort of black magic on him, my children do this. People get into panic states, right? And so they think that maybe there's some truth to it because this person has a Muslim name and, you know, they have something that sounds right and they promise to do something for you. It's so easy, and I'm telling you, these are much more widespread, these problems in our community. A lot of people fall for this. I hear it all the time, you know, that they said they could do this and that, and anyway. But my point is making sure that you have the discernment to know if a person is making claims that are not substantiated in our tradition, that where in the Sunnah is this? Where can you show me how this is valid, right? Where is it permissible to do this? Don't fall for it, right? No matter how well presented it is. Celestial aspirations. So this is the third quality. You know, akhirah focused. Always talking about the next life. You know, always talking about, you know, how to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the focus. A true spiritual guide, their focus is to try to, for themselves and for their whoever's, you know, their teaching, is to reorient. Right? That's what a guide does. A guide, a navigator, is the one who's saying, don't go that way, it's dangerous, go this way, right? And so when the dunya is calling you this way, shaitan is calling you that way, people who are not good company are calling you away from Allah, the guide is telling you, no, you have to, you know, want this, and they point you in the right direction, point you in that vertical alignment with Allah. Because the horizontal is where we get lost, right? The horizontal is where we all are. And so we need guides who are reminding us of the vertical alliance, you know, that this is what we need. We have plenty of horizontal stuff in every way we're getting pulled, but that vertical alignment is missing. So a true spiritual guide will always remind you of akhirah, will always remind you of Allah. A pleasing state, right? If you're a person who, again, is claiming, and it's not that you're claiming it, but let's say people presume that about you, then Allah will give you that tawfiq in the fact that you have a state that people are drawn to in a positive way. It's not just like allure, and you know, sometimes we can get mystified by certain people, but there's something that makes you feel safe, right? With a true spiritual guide, you just feel safe. You don't feel like they're trying to get something out of you. You don't feel like they're a little shady or iffy. But if you feel like those, you know, there's something off, then, you know, listen to that intuition, because true people of Allah, I mean, I remember the first time I heard, alhamdulillah, I mean, I've had experiences with different teachers, and each one has been really amazing, people that I consider to be sound, mashallah, teachers that I would definitely fit this description. But I remember, you know, for many of us, a lot of our teachers have been male, right? And so when you connect with a female teacher, it's, I mean, for me anyway, most of my teachers were always men. But the first time I met Ustadha Iman Sidqi, right? Or Sheikh Iman Sidqi, you guys know her. She's been up here, mashallah, many times before. But I remember the first time I ever saw her was in Southern California. She wears niqab, so, you know, we heard her many times, but I hadn't seen her. You know, I hadn't seen her face. So this was an all-female gathering. And I remember I was with my sister-in-law, Sahar, some of you know, mashallah, Sahar. And we had gone to see her because we were excited to meet her for the first time. And it was inexplainable. Literally, I was like, I just was like, we saw her without her niqab. And her just presence, her smile, we were crying. We were just like crying because she's so beautiful. And I was like, is she real? Like, how is she a real person? Because she's talking about the Prophet ﷺ, and like the entire time, kind of like Dr. Rania. You know, mashallah, Dr. Rania, I think, has that beautiful quality too, of just smiling through everything. And it's just, you can't help but like love her because she has such a, you know, beautiful disposition and just this way about her. But Ustadha Iman is even like more sugary than that. She's like honey dripping, you know. And you're just like looking at her, and I just remember we were both so moved because it was, I think, our first time really connecting to a female teacher like that. And I was like, subhanAllah, that's a woman of Allah, just by virtue of the effect she had. No dry eyes, everybody's weeping, we're like, what's going on here? Like, why are we all? But it's because Allah will give that, you know, to His, you know, to people who are who he's close to. And you see it. It's like the common denominator. If everybody's kind of feeling that way, then there's something very special about that person, right? Yeah. Smiling, right? And it gives you this feeling of, right, immediate connection. Yeah, mashallah. And then there's other teachers like, Sheikh Muhammad, who many of us learned from, who have haiba, right? Haiba is that like quality of just awe and strength, like formidable. Like you just look at them and you're like, why do I feel strong? And I'm like, I just want to go climb a mountain right now, right? And Allah will give that to some people. Like they have this presence of strength, right? Like no matter what, I can get through anything just being in the company of such people, right? So these are gifts that Allah will give to His people, but they're unique gifts, And there's other scholars who, how many times has this happened to you, where you're literally like, everything they're saying, you're like, oh my God, they're talking to me. They're literally talking to me. I needed this message. How do they know that I'm going through that? Or sometimes they'll look at you and they pierce right through your heart, and you're like, oh my God, what's happening? They're reading your mind. And that's from Allah too. The fact that Allah guides you to that circle and you're sitting there, you're just like, open canvas. You don't know what's happening, right? But He puts the words on the tongue that reach your heart, right? That's a gift from Allah, but it comes through the sabbath, through that scholar. So there's some scholars who just have that effect too. It's like an archer. Every time they speak, it's like, oh, you shoot me in the heart, right? So these are true people, whereas, the ones that you want to stay away from, it doesn't have that effect. It might be like a spell where you're like, but you can come out of that. These are people who it's consistent, it's consistently that way. Yeah. Absolutely, Sheikh. Yeah.
I've been to the other where I'm like craving and I'm like, I remember saying to my niece,
Yeah.
it was so beautiful.
Right.
It was so different. And then I go to those gatherings, like, subhanAllah,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It just doesn't grasp. It doesn't shake me like that.
Subhanallah.
So I feel like you do identify with people where you're like, that's not, this is not right.
Exactly.
That's fine.
Totally. No, the heart, I think there's fitra, right? We have like a natural inclination towards beauty, towards goodness, towards ihsan. And when you're attuned to that, you can recognize it, right? Yes.
So I have a question.
Sure.
When you just know about the charlatan, you just feel it in your bones,
Yeah.
and they have a following. And you just have to sit there and not
Yeah.
say a thing, people that you love,
Yeah.
that are just following and promoting and praising.
Yeah, make dua for them. There are, and I would agree, make dua for them, because the thing is scholars are not, what's the word? I can't think of the word, but they're not immune. They're not immune to falling for these same tricks and, these same pitfalls. They also have to read these things because they can get swept away by their own, effect. So imagine if you're a really great speaker, you're a really great orator, you're getting all these people coming up to you, running to you, and they just prop you up, put you on a pedestal. It's very easy, it's very seductive to fall for that, right? And then it's like, this is how shaitan deludes all of us, right? The speaker, the scholar, the teacher, all of us can be affected by these things. And that's why it's so important to see purification of the heart, and this process of cleansing oneself of spiritual diseases is ongoing, right? So when you see someone who's doing that, always make dua for them, because maybe they've been deluded by their own nafs, and Iblis has affected them, and they're under his spell, and we want that to be reversed, right? Now, if obviously certain things about them where they're causing harm, then that's a whole different conversation, right? Because you said for sure, right? If
Not for sure, but
you have a feeling, yeah. If it's a feeling that you have where you're just repelled by them, that's fine. That might be from a protection for you. But instead of letting it turn into like a rancor or like a disdain for that person, just be like, may Allah guide them, because they don't even realize, right? Maybe that maybe they don't even realize what's happening and they're swept away. Because fame is a big tribulation, and if it's a person who's popular, they're likely under some spell, if you feel that from them. Again, it's everything is very subjective, so it's hard to say definitively. But if you think that there is something that's insincere, or you don't feel like they're good, and you feel like they're charlatans, then I would say make dua for them. Ask Allah to guide them, to remove whatever diseases they have, and to protect others from their effect. And just leave them. And if instead, and I would. Sometimes when we're trying to protect our family and our loved ones, we don't realize that instead of calling out people or making, accusations unsubstantiated, instead of doing that, like, oh, I don't like them, I don't think they're sincere. Not to say you would do that, but I'm just saying sometimes we think that that's the way to, protect them and deter them from falling for it. I would say don't do that. Rather, show them true scholarship. Send them videos of people that you think are better, and be like, look at this. Because as we were just talking about, we all are, I think, hardwired, or at least the pure part of us, to recognize the beauty and the goodness. But some of us haven't seen it yet, So if you haven't seen it yet, then you take whatever's available to you. So it's like if you have, a really high quality experience, then maybe you will yourself recognize that there's a difference here. Right? But if this is the only thing you've been exposed to, then you can't really fault people, for not being able to see it. And I think that's why it's important to also, have teachers that speak to you and that you feel connected to, but also be willing to be open-minded and listen, as long as they fulfill the criteria. And the criteria is, have they been vetted? Are they, do we know their credentials? Do we know who their teachers are? Do they have, proper, is that all clear? If they're clear and they're sound teachers, then inshallah they should, they'll affect you in a positive way, But that's and then the last quality that he mentions here is and penetrating spiritual discernment. So that's another thing is that you can tell when they're speaking or when they're teaching, that they have an ability to see things from a lens that's, again, they have discernment, that wisdom, right? Discernment is hikmah. Knowledge, many people have knowledge. Wisdom is not the same. Wisdom is applying the knowledge in the best way, right? Because knowledge can just be you just know something, but wisdom is actually having the ability to weigh, things, and to give the proper answers to questions based on the given circumstances, right? Based on what's happening in that moment. And some teachers have that, and some don't. So, again, the point of a list like this is really so that we can start to be very guarded about who we allow to affect this most precious thing called our spiritual heart, right? Because it's the most important thing we possess. And if we don't guard it defend it with everything we have and make sure that we're very protective over it, then we're susceptible to all these, again, traps and pitfalls. And I was mentioning to someone earlier that Sidi Ahmad Zarruq, in one of his quotes, and this always stays with me because I find it so powerful. But remember, he was in the 15th century, right? 1500s, 1400s, late 1400s. He warned then that before you trust anybody to your faith, your family, your home, anything that's sacred to you, basically, make sure you've tested them 1,000 times. When I think about that quote, I'm like, Ya Allah, he's talking about his time, way before all this insanity that we live in the modern world. I mean, these are people who never saw filth the way we see it, or heard of evil the way we see. They never saw these things. It was a different type of, crimes and things maybe they experienced, but not to the degree that we're seeing it. And he, and he's warning then, 1,000 times test people before you let them in to this sacred, space. So I feel like that to me is so powerful, because it's like, in this day and age, I think a lot of us, part of our pain and our suffering is that we are a little too open. We have to be a little bit more careful. Don't tell everybody your secrets. That's not the basis of friendship. That's a lie. It's actually a total deceptive lie. That in order to be really close to someone, I have to divulge my secrets. No, you do not. And if that's a condition of a friendship, that is not a good friend. A good friend has adab, and they don't want you or expect you to unveil yourself to them, especially the things that, what are secrets? Secrets are usually things you don't want to tell everybody, right? They're things that maybe are parts of your life that are shameful, or things that you generally want to hide. But some people make those conditions of friendship, and I think with female relationships, just think of like yourself when you were in middle school and high school. Was that not the condition of a friendship, right? Who do you like? You better tell me, right? Ooh, is that your diary? Let me read your diary. I don't know, I just feel like female relationships start off with that notion, and then sometimes the people that we're bonded to the most are the ones that we confide in. And we tell maybe a little too much. So we should be careful of that. We should be careful of opening ourselves up so much that we lose these, the quality or these qualities of just shyness with Allah, right? Because if Allah veils you, you should never expose yourself. If Allah veils you, that's a gift from Him. And it's like it's in rebellion to Allah when you expose yourself. He veiled you. Nobody knows what you did. Keep it to yourself. We don't have the tradition of other faiths that you have to go through an intermediary to feel like you're, free of that sin. Like you've unloaded the burden because I confessed. No. Confess to your Creator. Go to Him. Say astaghfirullah. Get yourself aligned. Pick up yourself and don't do it again. Very pragmatic, very practical. But sometimes the nafs will be like, if you tell someone, right, misery loves company, shame loves, people who are in the same boat. Oh, I did that too. Oh, you did that. Ooh. What was your experience like? Oh, what was it? Astaghfirullah. That's not the believer. The believer doesn't do that, right? So these are types of things that we have to, I think, really be careful of, because in the modern world, when you don't have these guardrails, like these spiritual guardrails about what is appropriate, what is pleasing to Allah, what's not pleasing to Allah, then you become kind of, you can go in all sorts of directions. But, very good question. How do you get guidance if you don't do that? You have to be very selective about what you're asking for. Like if you're asking for advice or nasiha, then you can, with that intention, you ask the right person, right? But the person that you divulge or seek advice from should be someone qualified to give advice, right? And a friend isn't necessarily qualified, nor is a family member. No, they're not. They may love you, they may care for you, they may make you feel safe, but that doesn't mean they're qualified to give you advice on how to deal, right? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And they sometimes can give you far worse advice. So it's like you have to be, again, and I think that's why the first refuge is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And it really should be. Like when you do something really that you're not happy with yourself over, or you didn't do something, whatever it is, we have to just go back to fundamentals of our faith. What's your connection with Allah? Is He part of your life? Do you speak to Him? The people who speak to Allah, do we speak to Allah? Or is it just mechanical prayers that we do, right? Like, munajat is actually speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like as in conversation, right? So you're driving your car and you're like, Ya Allah, I feel so awful today. I woke up late for Fajr again. How are you so loving towards me? Because you give me so many blessings, and here I can't even pray Fajr on time. But it's like confession to the one who's going to receive that confession and who can change your state. Because if you're sincere, then it's like, what's the outcome of that conversation? Ya Allah, forgive me, please. I'm turning to you because you're the most forgiving. You're the most gentle. Please guide me, help me, strengthen me, right? Or whatever it is. You got into a fight with someone. Oh, I let my nafs go again, Ya Allah. Please help me with my tongue. I can't help myself. But they make me so mad. You're just like literally in conversation with Allah. He knows it all, but it's more about establishing ubudiyah, right? Like this beautiful quality of like, I am truly your servant, you are truly my Lord, and there's no one else that can help me anyway. I can talk to people and maybe feel good in the moment, but no one can help me other than you. So why don't I go to the source of help, right? If I go to the source of help and I beseech him and I ask him to change my circumstance, and then I just trust in the process, alhamdulillah. But if I talk to a friend, I talk to my mom, I talk to my sister, I talk to my husband, I talk to whoever, I haven't gone to the only one who can actually help me. I bypassed that. And I let my nafs feel good that I purged it here. But where's the solution, right? So, yeah, absolutely. Yes. Exactly. You will start to see, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, the signs become just, you'll see it. Because, inshallah, Allah, of course, manifests His signs in different ways. But people have experiences that you can't really describe them. You're like, this is 100% communication back from Allah to me. I make a dua and literally He answers it in the next moment. I have a thought or I'm reminded of someone and then moments later they're calling me or what is that? That is a sign that we're in communication with Allah and He's responding to us, right? But a lot of us, sometimes we're not asking for things and He still gives it to us. To hope, maybe in the hopes that we wake up, right? And we make the connections like this, Allah, are you answering my dua? Because you feel so insignificant, right? If you've ever had that happen where it's like, you feel like something has happened that's so, you can't explain it other than this is directly from Allah. A lot of times it's like, you start to question everything because you're like, I don't even think I'm significant enough to have any spiritual experience because I see myself, as always falling short. But here, Allah, you answered my dua so directly. Whoa. What does that mean all of a sudden, right? Well, He's telling you, I see you. Right? I heard you, and here it is. And so imagine if you had this constant stream of communication though. Like that's just who you go to. Then don't you think naturally the signs are going to increase? Right? I was, someone recently told a story about how they were going to teach something and they left their book, they needed that text. It's just coming to me right now because it was like the freshest example I have. But they were going to teach that book and they left it, wherever they were. I don't know if it was at home or wherever. And they were kind of like worried, like, uh-oh, I wanted to review the lesson before I have to teach. But they didn't have the book. So they end up going, it was in a Muslim country, so they said that they ended up going somewhere. And the person that they met was like, oh, I have a gift for you. It's a copy of the book. How can you explain that? There's no way you can say that was just from, coincidence. But Allah's like, you had a dilemma, and here I'm going to make it all work out so that you get the solution to your problem. And subhanallah. There you go, exactly. The other person gets the reward. It's like a win-win for everybody, right? They get the reward of helping someone that maybe they had no idea. I'm just giving you a gift. But who is the one that put it in their heart to time it, to bring it, to meet, to request the meeting at that time? And this was just on the way to the class. It was just like preordained. But we believe Allah is outside of time, qadr is real, and He can decree these things for us to make our lives easier. But we have to establish that connection, I think, to use a poor example, but it's kind of like the phone, You're going to have sometimes bad reception, poor reception, right? And that's kind of like, what do you do? If you're talking to someone and you really want to talk to them, you have poor reception, do you just like give up, right? Right? If you don't, exactly. Yeah, you go everywhere. You're like, I got to get a signal. You don't just give up, right? So if you feel like you're not getting the reception that you want, and this is just, again, trying to use this very poor analogy, but to kind of, say with dua, if you don't feel like you're getting something in return, you don't stop, you find a better, clearer connection, right? Because maybe it's just the signal is not good. There's something wrong in the signal. So don't give up, though. Try to figure out how to correct the signal problem, right? And that means, do I need to, and that's why we have established times where dua is mustajab. We have certain things that you can do to increase the likeliness, right? That your dua would be accepted, Absolutely. And then it's His timing. And that's part of belief, is that I do what I'm supposed to do, but ultimately I have to surrender to His decree. And I don't impose my timing on Him. It's His timing, like you said. But the process is what I'm talking about. So if you feel like I'm not getting anything, well, maybe you need to reevaluate. And that's why this text is here, because it's showing you, are you really doing everything the right way, right? Have you, polished? Have you taken some time to really look at the way you're worshiping your Creator? Because if you're having like a forked tongue, if on one hand, like I said, okay, I'm doing my prayers, but then on the other, you're cursing, you're making ghiba, like what's going on? You're the one that's standing in the way of tawfiq, right? You can't say, oh, but I'm making dua, but what are you doing, that's compromising the signal, the transmission? It's likely the sinfulness, right? So go back, make sure, you're holding yourself to a higher standard. And then on top of that, watching all those other areas of spiritual, like sincerity, like where else can I correct? What else can I do to make it better? Your company you keep, the time wasting. There's so much you can take inventory of. Right? I don't know. It's a good time to stop, inshallah. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. لا حول لا إله إلا الله. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة وصلاة القائمة آت محمد وصف فضيله وبعث مقاما محمودا الذي وعدتنا آمين يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, ladies. I think they're going to pray soon, so inshallah we can stop for any comments, questions, any reflections, inshallah. But I hope if you take away anything here from this discussion, kind of delved into different areas, it is, we're going to enter the Mubarak first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah soon. And remember, the Prophet ﷺ said, no good deeds are more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than those that are done in Dhul Hijjah. We have a huge opportunity in the next few days to really deepen this connection we're talking about. So whatever you do, just remember, like, this is now. I have to, don't lose, or what is the word? Don't lose the opportunity, Don't lose this opportunity to really connect. If you feel that there's something missing there, just beseech Him and talk to Him and turn to Him, inshallah. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, please. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.